Good morning. I'm pleased you chose to spend some of your valuable time with me today. I will do my very best to make it worth your investment. I'd like to really talk to you today about the future of strategy, the future of competition, the future of management. And I think about strategy over the last decade or two. Companies have not spent very much time on strategy, by and large. Most of them have been deep in their organizational plumbing, doing the reorganization and the restructuring, trying to rebuild their supply lines and supply chains, investing in IT. And a lot of organizations actually haven't spent very much time thinking about the future and getting ready for it. And it shows. There's some things we know today as empirical facts. We know that competitive leadership is changing hands more often than ever before. We know that competitive advantages erode faster than they ever have. We know that companies are getting into financial difficulties more often than in the past. And you see this in the increasing or the accelerating turnover of chief executives. But I'd argue that most of the success recipes that worked so well over the last 10 years for businesses around the world are not necessarily the recipes for success as you look forward. And that's really where I want us to start today, is thinking about what are the challenges that are going to define competitive success in the 21st century, and how our definition of strategy and leadership is going to have to change. You know, if you think back over the last 10 or 15 years, one of the most celebrated executives in the world, probably the most famous executive in the world, was Jack Welch. And he was imitated and followed by managers all over the world. The GE playbook became kind of the manual for companies all over the world. And yet, I will argue the strategies that he used, that many of his peers used over that last decade or so, those things are literally running out of steam. They're reaching the point of diminishing returns. Because the two primary strategies over the last decade, one has been efficiency and cost cutting. And that's important. Clearly we live in a world today where inefficiency has no place to hide, where every company has to be globally competitive on the cost side. And yet, company after company, you can see how they're getting to a point where it's taking more and more effort to extract smaller and smaller productivity gains, because most organizations have been working on this for quite a while now. This is not a new challenge. So we'll continue to work on that, but most companies are not going to be able to extract a lot of additional wealth from simply more aggressive cost cutting. The other thing, of course, that has driven strategies and growth over the last decade or two has been a global wave of mergers and acquisitions. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. There are a lot of industries around the world that are too fragmented. We have too many banks, too many airlines perhaps, too many insurance companies. So a certain amount of consolidation makes sense. But we also know a couple of things. We know that on average, mergers and acquisitions destroy shareholder value. About 70% of them end up destroying rather than creating value. We also know, and this is perhaps more controversial, but from our research, we've looked at more than 22 industries, and I can tell you that nowhere have we seen a correlation between resources and or I should say size and competitive leadership, size and profitability. It's just a relationship that doesn't exist. Often you'll hear an executive say you have to be number one or number two in your industry to compete. You have to be big to be successful, and that is simply wrong. Now, size is an advantage for sure. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but in a world that's changing as fast as ours is, that size can easily become a disadvantage versus an advantage.